Hi guys, Marshall here, and this is episode 7 of Exploring Codependency. It's not who you are. So in the last episode, we did a deep dive into rejection, and how rejection has two functions. We have the codependent interpretation of rejection, and then we have the empowerment, healthy interpretation of rejection, and its actual use in life, which is to filter out things so that we're able to choose our happiness and connect back with ourselves. But in order to know what happiness is for us, we do have to come to know ourselves. So what does that really mean? What does it mean to know ourselves? Well, in codependency, we typically experience a massive amount of what's called childhood emotional neglect. And what this is it's the experience of not being seen, not being acknowledged, not being witnessed, and not receiving what's called reflection, where the child receives an insight about themselves through the eyes of their caregiver, through the parent, typically. Now, again, childhood emotional neglect is about what didn't happen, not necessarily about what did, okay? Because neglect is a vacuum. It's the lack of something occurring. While the things that didn't occur was positive attention for who you are, positive attention for your existence, for the simple fact that you take up space, that you're present. These things were not valued. They were not praised. They were not adored and enjoyed. Your parent may have sometimes showed up and checked in on you, but you felt like an emptiness there, that there's kind of a buzz or a numbness that sometimes comes into that. In my own childhood, I only recall a couple of times where my parents spent time with me as a person, that they wanted to enjoy my presence, that they missed me, that they liked me, that they thought about me. See? But I can recall hundreds of times where my parents praised me for what I did. Now this brings up what I call the relating spectrum. There's two components to it. Relationships have one of two functions, and every relationship has both of these qualities at different measurements, different magnitudes would be a good word for it. So the first magnitude I call utility or object. It's where the interaction is oriented around an outcome. Like, you go to work, you do the work, you produce an outcome, you get paid for the outcome, you go home. That's a utility-based relationship. Very simple. It's like, you hired me, I produced the widget, you give me the money for the widget, I go home. And now we have the concept called connection. And in connection, it's about a mutual exchange of emotional vulnerability, where we feel connected to the other individual. We feel seen, acknowledged, and heard by them. We feel valued by them, that they matter to us, and that our feelings matter to them, and that their feelings matter to us. So that there's this mutual concern, engagement, care, and love for each other. This is typically exemplified by someone enjoying our presence. They like that we exist. They enjoy being with us, sharing time with us, and occupying our space with us. They want to engage time with us. They want to involve us in their world. They want to be involved in our world. And they're primarily concerned with who we are. They like who we are, and they like being involved in our lives. It's a very emotionally centered experience. Well, childhood emotional neglect, that's where we lose all of that. We didn't get that. We didn't get the experience of being liked, being enjoyed, being cared about. What we got was typically the utility-based relationship, where we were either praised for doing something or we were praised for nothing at all, meaning I didn't have needs. There's nothing wrong with Marshall. We praise him for it. That was dominantly my experience. I was praised for getting over my mother's death at the age of 13. Less than 18 months after she died. People are like, you did so good. My stepmother was very big on that because then she didn't have to deal with it. I was constantly praised for being strong. But really what it was is I was being neglected. Nobody was showing up and asking how Marshall was. Everybody thought I had it together. And I'm 13. My mother died just before my 11th birthday. And even at that point, my father was like, well, I thought he was just fine. That doesn't make sense, right? That's emotional neglect. That's childhood emotional neglect in action. And this can happen in anything, even with small details. Like, did they check in on me on my grades? Did they ask me how school was going? Did they sit down and ask me how I felt about girls and dating? Things like that. No, they didn't. They assumed that I had it all together, which made their job easier because then they didn't have to do their job. This is a typical form of indifference, and this narcissism typically shows up in two functions. One, they're hyper-controlling. They're going to control, manipulate, and stipulate everything, or they're going to just discard you. And the only time you're going to hear from them is when they want something from you. That's the indifference narcissist. So you got the controlling, absorbing one, and the indifferent, discarding one. So coming to know ourselves, coming to understand who we are, requires us to go through a reparenting process. And I go through this very, very deeply in the foundation course, specifically with laws. Well, the whole course is really about coming to know ourselves. But we go deep into some of the intricacies of nurture inside ourselves with Law 4 and Law 5. Because for us to feel seen, we need to know what it feels like to be seen, right? And I guarantee you, there's at least one person in your world right now that sees you, that cares about who you are, that cares about your existence, and that has an affinity and a love for who you are. Your feelings matter to this individual. The way you're going to be able to detect this individual, to see them, is how they talk to you about you. Do they share appreciation for you? Are they grateful that you're there? Do they want to just spend time with you? These are the people that say, I don't care what we're doing, I'm just happy to be in your world. These are the people that ask us how we're feeling. They're honest with us. They confront us on the bullshit we do in our lives, and they're receptive to our feedback too. They care. And we see that in their behavior. This is an individual you can start to relate to about seeing yourself. Because let's say her name is Sally, and Sally says, I see inside you, Marshall, you're a very kind person. Now we have an opportunity to accept that and go, there is kindness in me. Now, can I see that in myself too? And if we're not sure what that means, let's ask Sally, well, can you give me examples of this kindness you see? And then she could say, well, I see how attentive you are to your friends, how you've been attentive to me, how you're mindful about what you say and what you do. And especially when you screw up, you reach out and you correct it. This is what I see you doing, Marshall. This really matters. Now I'm beginning to see myself because I can correlate my behavior with that feedback and go, oh yeah, I see myself doing that. And that means there's kindness in me. And now I can take an opportunity to do what's called self-reference. Self-reference is the act of identifying that somebody sees a quality in me. I can identify that quality in someone and how that feels for me. And then I can register that person who sees that quality in me feels that way or in a similar way to me. So like Sally feels kindness to me and I feel kindness towards John. John's very kind to me. I feel this energy with it. then I can assume pretty reliably that Sally feels that same kind of energy towards me. What this does is then we can see ourselves with that energy too, because it gives us a reference point. Children growing up get this reference point. Healthy ones get this because the parent's reflecting back to the child the attributes the parent sees in the child, and then the child's like, oh, I see what this means. This is behavior is kind and this behavior is mean. And then when the child approaches, the parent says, I love you, give you hugs, and then the parent's like, I love you too, and I love your hugs. The child begins to associate that their love is felt by the parent, and that the parent feels the same way about the child. So the child then feels the same way about themselves with that energy. Well, that's what we're creating there, self-reference. This is partly how we come to know ourselves. This is partly how we become whole again and come seated in our being. Because knowing ourselves is not just a tactical thing. It's not like I know my personality and my love languages and my conflict styles and my communication preferences and things like that. Those are important. We explore those in Law 4 with the U assessment. But deeper is coming into our beingness and being able to feel ourselves. Getting back into our body, back into connection with our presence and our physicality. Because it's here that we exist, not up here in our thoughts. When we can reconnect to the body, then we can reconnect to our true self, the real self, the self that exists within us. And so knowing ourselves is key to understanding benefits that come from rejection and to understand what we're looking for in attachment. And you see I've got a kind of a path here with this course. Because when we start to know ourselves, then we can detect who is right for us, who fits in our lives. So we're asking the right question and getting accurate answers. How do they fit me? Well, because I know myself and I know my body. I know when my body's telling me like, there's something wrong with this person or this relationship, or my body's saying this is good for us, let's go there. I know these impulses, I know these intuitive signals. I can respond appropriately to them. I also know my codependent impulses. I know when I'm going after somebody or a relationship with somebody that isn't interested, because there's a certain energy to it. There's a certain impulse. It's like a pleaser or prover impulse. I'm trying to get their approval. Oh, well then I'm pursuing this person for the wrong reasons. I'm also likely pursuing the wrong person in general. So we get deep in this in foundation so we understand ourselves. And then this also builds into liking and loving ourselves. And when we get into that, we're able to make much better choices for ourselves. Because when we love and like ourselves, we're not attached to a dependency on the relationship for our value. Instead, that value is inside us. We have taken full ownership of it, and it has autonomy in us. We have kept our self-worth sacred and self-contained. And we're able to say no to relationships that aren't working. We're able to say no to relationships we don't want. And we're able to say yes to relationships that do work for us. Because we become safer in our attachment that then moves into connection and bonding. So, I want you to think about this. Ask me questions below or in the Facebook group. The links are below. Just join me there. If you're ready to make a big leap in your life and transform codependency into thriving, check out the foundation course below and enroll. I'll see you guys online. If you got questions, again, ask in the group or ask below. I'm excited to see how this impacts you. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.